Welcome to Transcendent Psychotherapist. In this episode, I'm going to be reviewing this great little book called Transcend by Scott Barry Kaufman, the new Science of Self-Actualisation. I would love to hear what you think of what I'm sharing about this book today in the comments underneath. Do you love it? Do you hate it? Marmite? Love it? Hate it? Indifferent? Let me know. So, this book is basically about Abraham Maslow's kind of psychology of human self-actualization and transcendence, asking the question, how is it that we can get beyond simply coping with life and really thriving and kind of maybe even getting to some kind of mystical, like really fulfilling stuff in life as well. So stay tuned. If you know nothing about Maslow or you know loads about Maslow, there's more to learn because Kaufman really kind of unpacks some unknown stuff. So the first thing that really fascinated me about this book, and I've watched him also in some of his videos, is that Maslow never ever drew a pyramid of needs, a hierarchy of needs. So if I asked you what's the one thing you probably heard of about Abraham Maslow, it's the hierarchy of needs and the pyramid. Okay, but nowhere, not in any of his books, not any of his notes, did Maslow ever draw a pyramid, apparently. So that was just a kind of interesting fact, fun fact. Okay, so let's get straight into this. So who was Maslow and kind of what was he about? So if we go back to the time when Maslow was really active, particularly at the beginning of his career, there were kind of two major forces in psychology. Okay, on the one hand you had Freud with his kind of psychoanalysis, and on the other hand you had Skinner with his behaviourism. And Freud was kind of all about, this is a bit kind of unfair, but all about what goes wrong with humanity, kind of neuroses and kind of psychopathology. And Skinner was all about kind of treating humans a bit like kind of lab rats, with kind of like input-output machines that, you know, just like kind of machines really, and it was all a bit reductionistic. And the humanist psychologists like Maslow kind of thought, well, then there's got to be something more to psychology than simply kind of what goes wrong with us or treating us like kind of machines. Can't psychology kind of teach us about what goes right with humans and what makes us flourish? In fact, a few years ago, I studied positive psychology, which as a discipline kind of comes out of Maslow and the humanists and asks that very question. You know, what could go right? How can we learn from studying what goes well with humans, and how can we kind of then kind of extrapolate that and help people to do more of that good stuff? Maslow wasn't just a humanist psychologist, that he was also a developmental psychologist, which means he really understood what it is that makes people kind of, well, how they develop, obviously, how they develop, how they grow. And kind of from that point, you know, basic kind of childhood, child development psychology then asks, as we go further into life, kind of how do we kind of really become and develop into our full potential? And that's the thing that really interests the humanist psychologists. So having dispensed with the pyramid, no pyramids anymore, Kaufman introduces a new metaphor. This is not from Maslow himself, but a new metaphor to pin the theories on. And his metaphor is that of a sailboat, or as we might call it in the parts of the world where we speak proper English, sorry Scott, sorry Americans, a sailing boat or a yacht. So I'm going to introduce my wonderful little board here now for you, and I'm going to talk you through the sailboat metaphor. Okay, I'm just going to hold that up for you so you can see it, and I'm going to keep returning to this as we go. So basically what you've got here is you've got down the bottom the kind of basic needs of human beings. Okay, so this is what Maslow called his theory D. Now D stands for deficit, so it's the needs, it's the gaps, things that we need to fill to kind of cope and survive. This is all in the realm of basic human security and being secure, being okay, basically. I'll talk through that, the different stages in a second. And up here on the sail, you've got Maslow's theory B, and the B stands for being, kind of like becoming the sort of person we might become, our potential, which of course is what the humanistic psychologists are interested in. Up here, you've got really quite unknown, a lot of people don't know about this at all, Theory Z. And this is all about human transcendence, which is about, transcendence just means kind of leaping across, leaping beyond, kind of getting beyond our normal limits. So we've got a security-based theory aspect of human development, we've got a growth-based aspect of human development, and then I'm going to talk about this in the following video, this kind of idea of transcendence. How can we kind of transcend? And I'm going to suggest in the next video, I think Maslow maybe misses a trick, so tune in for that one as well and see whether you agree with me or think I'm just no idea what I'm talking about, which is quite possible. Okay, so let's kind of work our way through this a little bit and try and understand what's going on. So at the bottom here, you've got kind of safety, and that's like your physical safety, it's your psychological safety as well. So if you are a starving human being, you are really going to probably not be that interested in, certainly probably not transcendence, probably not that interested in what your life purpose is. Your life purpose becomes, where's my next meal? Where am I going to get some food? Okay? So safety is like the bedrock. Without that, the boat does not float. All right? So that's kind of right at the bottom. But also linked in with that, and part and parcel of it, is our sense of connection. Because as human beings, we, unlike, say, reptiles that can be born and they can pop out of their egg and straight away survive, they don't really need to hang around their mum too long. Human beings are obviously really dependent for quite a long time. And so we are therefore a really highly social surviving type of creature. And as human beings, we really need to be able to belong and stay in the tribe, because in our long distant past, and you might argue definitely, well, it's definitely true today, and I'll give you an example in a second. If you were out of the tribe, if you were marginalised and kicked out of the tribe, you probably weren't going to survive. Okay? Kaufman shares a quite shocking fact, actually, which is that if elderly people have both a sense of loneliness, but also in their actual lives they're isolated and living alone as well, then they're actually twice as likely to die prematurely. So this is an important point, because it's not something that we kind of like, well, I've done level 1 and now I can do level 2, and then later in my life I can do level 3, 4, 5, whatever. Not at all. Actually, all of these bits are kind of vital all the way through life. And that's the problem with the pyramid metaphor, because the pyramid version kind of is like what, Kaufman calls it like the video game approach. It's like, I've done level 1, I've done the safety, move on to level 2. It doesn't work like that. Okay, so next thing to say, I suppose, is having a sense of safety, having a connectedness. We also need to have a strong sense of self, a strong self-esteem. One of the things that's really interesting about a strong sense of self and a sense of self-esteem is, well, firstly, people often think that having a strong sense of self makes you kind of selfish. It makes you, perhaps a not good person, not doing some of this higher order stuff. But actually, the research evidence, and I talk about this in another episode, the one called Evidence-Based Spirituality, if you want to look at that, I go into that in quite a lot of detail. But actually, a stronger sense of self, we know, makes you more likely to be caring for other people and able to transcend. Because if you haven't got a stable sense of self, you're going to be so preoccupied with you and getting your needs met that you're not going to be able to rise up and do this other stuff higher up. Now, self-esteem, obviously, as well, this is the second point I was going to make about self-esteem. Self-esteem is also highly connected into connection. Now, back in the sort of 70s or 80s, if you were in America, there's a massive kind of self-esteem movement, right? Really bigging kids up, for example, and telling them how great they were. And all that produced was just a lot of narcissists, really, a lot of narcissism. And what we know really actually helps a healthy sense of self-esteem. Kaufman talks about a healthy versus unhealthy sense of self-esteem in the book, so I'll let you read that there. But what really helps us build a healthy sense of self-esteem is having a sense that we matter, having a sense that we've got intrinsic worth as a human being, but also feeling like we've got something to offer others. And so self-esteem is really connected into, excuse my kind of double use of the words here, but really connected into our sense of connection with others. And you know what? We've actually got really highly sensitive kind of subconscious parts of our mind that can tune in really rapidly to where we fit in or don't fit in the kind of social order. So it really matters if you're slightly marginalised, if you're not included and you're not able to access things socially. It's going to affect your self-esteem. Okay, so let's say we've got these things fairly stable, and let me bring that in again for you to see. So we've got our safety and our connection and our self-esteem. We've got our security needs largely met. We don't have to have it completely solved, but it's pretty stable. The boat's going to stay in the water. It's not going to sink, okay? The deficits are broadly filled. The gaps are kind of filled. That leads us into a place now where we can start to consider moving out of the harbour, okay? So we're less concerned now with being nice and safe and staying where there's no risks, and we can move out into exploration. And it's in this spot, with exploration, that we can start to embrace sort of uncertainty. Now, uncertainty begets anxiety in humans. None of us really like uncertainty. We prefer, if we can, to have a nice, stable and predictable environment, because that then affects us and makes us feel nice and stable and secure on the inside. But there comes also boredom, because if things are just too stable, we get bored. And so some uncertainty and embracing uncertainty is really important for bringing the excitement back into life. And so as we're getting more secure and we're branching out to start exploring in life, we might become more able to be a bit more adventurous socially, to put our opinions out there, to risk creating friendships or venturing friendships or relationships that we can't guarantee are going to work. We might start to kind of think a little bit more and intellectually kind of explore ideas that we might have felt threatened by in the past. Okay, so we become more curious. We might start to explore things more artistically, more musically, and kind of get a bit more creative. So that's the kind of exploring drive. And notice what's starting to happen here, and I'll talk about this more at the end, is there's a move of the self, of the person's psyche, from a kind of more closed in, keep it nice and safe, keep it nice and cosy, to a more open and expanded experience. And what's happening there is the self is actually growing. That potential that Maslow is interested in, we're starting to expand and grow as human beings. The question, before I get any further up, that we might ask is, do we need, and I'm going to slightly contradict myself, but not really contradict myself, do we actually really need to wait until all of this stuff is secure down the bottom before we do any of this stuff up here? And the answer to that is yes, broadly we do, but actually some of this stuff and growing also supports our needs down the bottom. Okay, so the next thing I want to think about is the love aspect. Now, this was a really great chapter. Go and read it, get the book. But he really talks about the love bit here and compares it to the connection part. Okay, because down here, what's the difference is what we're asking. Okay, what's the difference between love and connection and social belonging? With connection, it's more about security, getting love, being loved. Okay, up here, it's more kind of about the virtue of being a loving person. It's less conditional. You're less interested in just that person and what they can give you, and more interested in how you can be a giving person to others. Again, there's that opening up of the self, of the psyche. And interestingly, part of that, and he gives some great quotes in there, part of that also involves when we put ourselves in a more loving mode of being, we benefit from it as well, because you're swimming in that warm glow and that tide, if you like, or that water of love. You benefit. If you get in the water, you're going to get wet as well. Let's move it up. The next one, purpose, is really what it says on the tin. It's all about values. So here we start to do what Nietzsche calls kind of living for a why. You know, the man who has, or the woman who has a why can bear almost any how, says Nietzsche. And so purpose then, of course, strengthens our ability to cope with the turbulence of life. It helps us with the stuff down here as well. But we're getting into kind of bigger, more kind of higher values. And our life is more expanded into something that's not just about us. It's about, you know, what can I bring to the world? What can I contribute? What can I achieve? What can I be about? And he also quotes, not quotes, but mentions Viktor Frankl, the psychoanalyst that went through the Auschwitz concentration camp, who kind of talked about how purpose also can help us survive, as it has a survival value. So this kind of feeds back as well. Okay, so Frankl talks about how it wasn't the big burly guys in the concentration camps that survived necessarily. Much more important for survival were the people that had a sense of being about something else, but being able to live for something beyond their current experience. So that's kind of the model in a nutshell. Next time I'm going to talk about transcendence, but really here we've got a journey where the person is starting to unfold, I think, things that are kind of already in them in potential. And of course, what's interesting there is that we've got all of this. You can't unfold something that's not there to start with. So that's a really interesting thought about where all this comes from. And I think Maslow misses a trick. So I'm going to talk about this more next time. Do subscribe, do comment, want to hear what you think. Great to hear from you, and see you in the next video, hopefully. Take care. Bye.